So we have the Laowa 15mm shift lens. They just came out with this, and I thought no better place to test it than on this listing shoot because it's a 3-story townhome. Funny enough, it's still not enough to get the whole building, but you can see here. Hey guys, welcome back to a new video. So today we're talking about the most interesting lens I've gotten to use. This is the Laowa 15mm RF shift lens. Been using this for about a couple weeks now and used it on a handful of real estate shoots. And I gotta say, super impressive. So for all of my real estate needs, for real estate photography, videography, client shoots, I use a 16-35 and recently upgraded to a 15-35 2.8 RF, which is probably the most expensive lens I've invested in, but it's been really well worth it. Something I always do is I rent gear before buying it, test it out on client shoots, creative shoots, whatever, and then make a decision based on that. And having that lens for a week sold me. So, am I sold on this lens after using it for a couple of weeks? Find out at the end of the video. So, first off, this is not a super technical review. That's why I didn't even put review in the title. I find it better to showcase my experience using something through client work, actual examples, and just give you the information on how it was using that thing, and then you can make your own decision based off of that. So a shift lens can essentially shift the perspective of what you're looking at. So if you have a wide angle lens and you're pointing it up at a tall building or something that you can't fit in the frame if you're looking directly, so you gotta angle it up, you're gonna get distortion. You know, your lines are gonna look like this, like this. Like right now in my set, these lines from my shelf are straight. And for real estate, you don't want that. You want your verticals to be perfectly straight. That's kind of the biggest tell from a professional to an amateur, keeping your verticals straight, not skewed. So that's essentially what this thing can do. So the first shoot that I used this on was pretty interesting. It was actually a perfect example because it was a listing that I shot in Houston. It was a 2-story house on a little bit of a higher elevation, and when I shot it with my 16-35, I had to do this. Had to hold the camera above my head. Luckily, thank goodness for IBIS, autofocus, and flip screen so I could get the shot, and I had to hold it above my head and take the photo. Looks great. But the only problem is because I had to do that method and my tripod wasn't tall enough, I couldn't do any bracketed shots or any HDR because, you know, I'm holding it like this, so I could only get a single exposure. So that's where this comes into play. So I put this on my tripod, got even closer, and my tripod was only at like chest height. I was able to shift up and get my lines vertically straight. Fit the whole house in the frame from where I was. It was kind of mind-blowing because it almost didn't make sense to me. Just looks so weird to me, but it works really well. So the fact that I could essentially get the same shot from my chest perspective, I could bracket it if I want, now that it's on a stable tripod, didn't have to raise my arms over my head, is exactly what you can do with this type of lens. So being able to actually do this real time in camera, not have to do any vertical correcting in editing, is pretty cool. So then I went to another property where I thought this was gonna be the perfect lens for this. So we have the Laowa 15mm shift lens. They just came out with this, and I thought no better place to test it than on this listing shoot because it's a 3-story townhome. Funny enough, it's still not enough to get the whole building. You can see a really awesome correction that it does. If I angle it up all the way, I can get the whole house, but it's fully distorted. And if I shift it, I can get almost everything, just missing the top of it, but everything looks vertically correct, which is really cool. But if we could only get a little bit farther back, then it would probably be a perfect result. But still, having that flexibility is pretty awesome. So this is without any shifting at 15mm, and then here it is with shifting it up. So the verticals are correct, but we're clipping that last part of the building, the top part of it. But if we could get a little farther back, we would easily get the whole building with none of this vertical craziness. Looks really cool, honestly, especially with the sun flare, but it's not, you know, really correct or professional. You do want your verticals to be correct. Thinking about it now too, one of the other things that's really interesting about this lens is you can change the direction of it. So you can shift any direction. So if I were to do this shot again, I would probably shift my camera to be vertically and then shift up and down. That would probably get most of the whole house because it's definitely such a tall and narrow house. That would have worked out better than just horizontal. But this case is honestly super rare because in other instances you can back up as much as you can and you won't have to run into that problem where you'll be cutting off the top of a property. So there definitely were a couple of drawbacks I noticed using this lens on shoots compared to something like my 15-35. One of the things I was also really anxious to try out was using it for interiors. Sometimes I've seen some real estate shoots where the floor looks bigger or the ceiling looks bigger, but the verticals are still correct, and I'm like, how are they doing that? Are they angling them down and purposely, correcting it in editing? But no, that's done with the shift lens. You can angle down, so kind of where your camera is looking down, and then correct the vertical by shifting back up, and you'll get more floor in the shot. But because this is 15mm, you get a ton of distortion whenever you're shifting really far up or down, on the borders, because it's already 15mm and you're essentially stretching that pretty far. So I wasn't a big fan of that, because even though you got more floor in the shot, which someone might want to see, it just looked really distorted. I bet if you did that with their 20mm version, you'd probably get much nicer results.
One of the other things that's also really kind of confusing me, not confusing me, but I'm just not used to, is this is a fully manual lens, no autofocus or pretty much no electronic parts, and so you have to just do your aperture here, and I'm not used to it because when I go shift it, I accidentally bump it, and then all of a sudden my image is darker or brighter. So that's one thing you have to be careful with, and your focus. I'm using focus peaking to make sure, but just have to be on top of a lot of things since it's a fully manual lens.
And then the last big drawback that I noticed is this big bubble lens. Looks really cool, but you can't put any filters on it. I always use a polarizer for all of my real estate shoots. I'm using one right now because it can block some of the hot spots on my face. Polarizer is probably my go-to filter because it just has so many uses, and not being able to use one on this is a bit of a bummer, because every time you'll have crazy shiny floors, especially if they're wood floors, or you can deepen the skies, see better through windows, cut reflections. So not being able to use that is a bit of a bummer, but I guess the other way you could get around it is if you got the EF version and then you use the RF to EF adapter, so you can put in the drop-in filters. So in other words, the polarizer goes before the lens. That would be the only way around that. But it's not a deal breaker, but I guess for me, because I'm used to using a polarizer, it was a bit of a bummer. So overall, I was super impressed with this lens. What it does and what it offers is honestly really impressive and super handy for real estate photographers. Do I think that I'll invest in this? No. And I think that's just because of where I am and the type of work that I do. Real estate is a big chunk of my business, but it's not the only thing I do. I really chose to invest in my 15-35 because of how versatile it is with the autofocus, the stabilization, the flexibility of zooming into 35 at 2.8, super handy for other types of works, even videos like this, things like that. If I hadn't already invested in a quality real estate lens, I would probably then look at this for sure. Because the great thing about this is this works like a regular 15mm lens. It's not just for shifting. You shoot real estate at f8 or f11, you don't need autofocus, so you can set your focus and go through the whole home perfectly fine. So this is a really great real estate lens, especially at 15mm. But I just think for me, it's not worth the investment since I already have something else. But for other people, it definitely might be for sure. So this video isn't sponsored by Laowa. They did send this lens for me to test out, but I definitely wanted to make a video about it, showcasing it, because I still think this is a super unique and valuable lens that could basically be your one and done real estate lens for sure. And especially the fact that you have that shift capability built in, you'll never really have to worry about verticals ever again for the most part. So that's pretty much it for this video, guys. Leave a like if you enjoyed, comment down your thoughts on the Laowa 15mm RF shift lens, subscribe if you haven't already. I would love for you guys to be part of the channel, and I'll see you guys in the next video. See ya.